How you doing, Rochelle? Damn. What's going on, sis?
Hey,
Wagwan, Wagwan. How you doing?
nothing
Okay,
much.
all right. So today is a lot's going on in the world, a lot of topics, but always grateful to look forward to Tuesday, where I get to talk to my sister about some
Hey.
happy, healthy, hard, challenging, but helpful topics that are happening in the world. And we were having a conversation just beforehand about, just difficult truths. But as you kind of know, every week we come to kind of discuss these things. And one of the things that we kind of love and appreciate about our dialogue and being able to talk is that it's a brother and a sister talking about difficult things and the range, but with love, with love, a spirit of learning, a spirit of humility. And so we're kind of all dialed in about that. And so, sis, I'm gonna have you tee this one off because this is a wide one, but this is a deep one. What's going on, fam?
So yes, hearing and delivering hard truth. I was so before we got on this call, I was telling you how I think it's very difficult, even people we love, to call them out, to hold them accountable, right? Like there are certain people in our lives that just can't take it. For whatever the reason are, there's a hypersensitivity. And I think a lot of people just assume someone else is going to tell them down the line. And a lot of us try to avoid it. I think even when it comes to siblings, best friends, you know your people in your life and you know what they can handle. And a lot of people can't handle it. Like when it's a stranger, like right now we have all these Karens. You tell these white people they're racist, they start crying, they start getting defensive. Even when it's the truth, people get very defensive, they start crying, they're annoyed, they get defensive, they project, they reflect onto you. This is what you're doing, this is what you could have been doing. So I think when you are delivering hard truth, you have to be ready that someone's not going to take that. They're not going to accept it.
Yeah, there's been so many areas where I think this is applicable and universal over the past week, and so many areas and so many topics that I think this is applicable. One thing I do want to jump on the sword a bit around this is because what's going on, Kira? We were just texting before. Is that the a lot of times part of the difficulty in hearing the hard truth because it feels so personal. And it feels personal because I think people take their views on things or their perception of themselves and they fuse it to their identity, right? This is who I am. And by someone saying something other than or countering what they already believe about something or believe about themselves, if it's about your identity, it's always inherently personal, right? And so because of that, every conversation seems like an attack. Everything is a pushback because it's kind of like, wow, I didn't know how much I actually valued the idea that this is true. We see this in politics. We see this in terms of like we see this in terms of it's a human nature, even a psychological thing. Like I always laugh about when people go to games, and you know, is it just so happen that everyone always agrees on the call for this team? No, it's because you're already bought in because that's your team. So you're already predisposed to seeing certain things a certain way. When certain things go an opposite way, you're upset because you have incentive. And I think we all have a personal incentive in terms of our conception of self, feeling good about ourselves, feeling understanding. I mean, we saw this in even this topic with Molly and Insecure. We started to explore why is it she came here? Well, we could actually, though we don't know, we're just only is only conjecture, right? For someone who's so high achieving and it sees herself as good at these things, if you are challenging how good she is in something, you're challenging her sense of self. And that is a no-no. And I think that's where I'm just kind of laying the foundation. My sense is that's where, because I can understand, that's where it may come in.
Also, I want to say two things. One, I think people are often in denial. So they are, I was using this with my partner in a relationship. Your partner is your mirror. So anybody, especially women, because we do our own hair, I guess you cut your hair. It's hard to see the back of your head. it is hard to see the back of your head. You as a human being can't see all angles of yourself sometimes. So when someone is in your life, they're saying, hey, I see this side of you. I'm holding you accountable to this. A lot of people's like, well, that can't be true. Well, I don't see that. You know what I mean? And there's like a denial that becomes defensive because you are sometimes exposing them to a side of themselves that they weren't fully aware of. But let's talk about delivery a little bit, because a lot of times we deliver heavy news in an angry way. Okay? And we got really upset, and now you're telling somebody about themselves. It could be true, everything you're saying, but why did it come from such a hostile place? Why didn't you bring that up before? Usually those conversations tend to be happening, you know, when I'm bringing up, like I can tell my partner, sometimes I'm bringing up stuff about him, and that's when he's like all of a sudden telling me about myself. Why didn't you bring that up before? Why are you bringing it up now? You know, so it's like often we also think about the delivery. Like if you are invested in that person, then you need to create a safe environment. Still no guarantees that they're going to accept it, but a safe environment to tell them this is what you've experienced and this is your observation based on your interaction and time with them. So I think delivery is really important, but there's no guarantee someone is going to accept that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's real. And I think I find it hard that anyone could ever say that they've never been on the receiving end or the delivering end of difficulty. I think another piece of it is sometimes when you're calling out the hot water, the kettle's already whistling, and to some degree, people are responding in hurt, right? And so out of their hurt, they're delivering it hard because what they're responding to has hurt them. And so now they're kind of communicating out of that. But to your point, it's difficult to communicate those things, and also the timing of it, right? But but I think this points us even to something that I think is almost a systematic way to think about this, right? Because to our initial point, you talked about how the deliverer, the messenger, is so essential in that your perception of the messenger. And sometimes you almost have to think, if I'm consistently always in this position of pushing back, then like it says a couple things. Like one, is there not a message? If there is a messenger, because I think there are people in my life where, because of the lack of frequency, or because of my respect or my adoration or admiration of their views or thoughts, if they said something difficult, doesn't mean it wouldn't be difficult, but there are people you feel more susceptible to start to do the digging because you already have held them. If Beyonce, because think about it, we love it on the positive end, not the negative end. If Beyonce came up to me and was like, yo, that shirt is popping, right? You kind of like, oh, because you already view her a certain type of way, right? And because of that, you'll take that. But if Beyonce came and said like, yo, your shirt's a little struggle, you know what I'm saying? On another hand, you might think about it a little bit because you're like, yo, man, like this is Beyonce. I think that plays out, and I think the thing that is actually concerning is that you have to be honest. We have to be honest with ourselves. If I'm consistently what's going on, Amma? If I'm consistently if there's not a person in my life where they actually have the license to say something, and I may not agree or may not see that, but I'm going to just automatically go to work through that. That says two things. One, you probably should have someone like that. If that person does exist, that means that already implicates your view of the other people who have issues with you saying these things. Because you're already saying that there's someone that you will listen to and wrestle with. And I think it's because we have stakes in it, right? And so part of our challenge is that, think about it, if you really believe that this person has your best interest at heart, wouldn't you at least like really wrestle with it? And I think the truth is for both people. In that moment, you lose sight of that, or in that moment exposes that you don't believe that about that person. Both are troublesome.
So I'm a firm believer, if someone gives me criticism, whoever that person is, I'm going to take it and assess it to see if there's some truth to it. Okay? I'm not here.
Why? Could you share that? Why for you do that?
Because I live by the principle, the biggest room in life is the room for improvement. So I like to be held to that. I don't ever want to reach a place where I'm not hearing people's criticism. We use Beyonce, for example. Beyonce is one of the greatest performers in our time right now, right? She will still she talks about going on YouTube for hours, studying dance moves, different cultures to see what she can add to make her performances bigger and better than last time, right? So she knows that there is more to getting bigger and better. So I'm always interested in getting bigger and better. I'm also understands that no one is perfect, right? And I think some people are afraid of criticism because they think they need to achieve some level of perfection. I'm entitled to friends, love, family, a good job, a good salary, regardless of the fact that I am not perfect. I am going to continue to work on getting better, but I'm already entitled to everything I deserve in life, regardless of perfection, not because perfection is not even an attainable thing. I think it keeps us motivated, and people should stay motivated. You know, you don't want to ever be in a place of complacency. So I don't mind that stuff. I can hold you accountable for your delivery and still listen to the substance of that you delivered. And I think people need to be able to do that. When we think about like Insecure, Molly, and other people, they have a fragile sense of self, I think. And when you go and you criticize them, you're chipping away at this like fragility they have. And that is some of the reaction you're getting because they've created this image of themselves. They created this facade that they like to stay in because they're not okay with the idea that no one's perfect, because someone has told them that if you are not perfect, then you are not entitled to certain stuff, which is just false, or that's something they've walked away life with. I don't know if someone has explicitly told them that. So delivery is so important, but we also live in society where we are no longer criticizing people because we're scared to hurt them. So people are like losing the practice of hearing criticism, accepting criticism, which is like so problematic to me.
Yeah. I when you talk about living in the age, I think one of the platforms where you see that a lot is social media, right? So you know, if you've ever been on Twitter or you see the comments of things, it is a case study in our inability to hear. It also shows how a lot of times people don't necessarily come. And one of the goals I feel like I want to talk about having in this year is that one of the goals is having more conversation. So I kind of come more to social media. If you kind of see on Twitter, I like respond and reply. I'm going into conversation and build relationships and nurture relationships as opposed to just be one way. Even with the things that I post, seeming the ideas, and I'll post like an idea. Every person that responds, I'm usually engaging with a conversation, right? I think it's very, very challenging, like you said, because of the fragility. And also there's economic interest too, online, right? Where what's tied to it is that I have this perspective. I'm putting it out there. You chopping me or you kind of challenging me kind of messes up my platform, right? Or people are going to view me as less than or less worthy or less wise or this. We don't value the humility as a real powerful and beautiful character trait. Humility is so necessary to learn. It's necessary for relationship. It's necessary for forgiveness and humility. And so because of that, I think we struggle with that online. I can understand, right? I think it's kind of like dog eat dog when you think about social media, right? Like someone says one thing, we offer no grace, right? So you understand why people are a certain way. Some person says one thing, they're not allowed to be human. One person takes it out of context or projects. Like I said, it's the projection projects is what I call Twitter. Projection projects. So one person says one thing that's off. People retweeting, dragging this. So now you're going to start to come out with armor on. I'm right. There's nothing wrong because people don't even respect the grace. Even if you say, oh, I'm sorry, you should have said that in the first place. Wow, it's so dog eat dog. I think that carries on even in terms of our relationship. We feel it makes us weaker to be able to say, I don't know, right? Or I don't understand. And I think it is hard. And so not even just speaking from this professorial type of standpoint, it's hard, right? We see it in our, like I said, our own relationships. We see it with our family. Sometimes it's hard to feel like you feel like you're giving something up. But to that original point, right? Depending on the topic that you're talking about, for me, it far outweighs the growth and the learning right? But when you feel like there's something at stake or someone's going to take advantage of me if they keep saying I'm wrong, that's where you have some of the challenges that I think that we all kind of struggle with in some sense. So yeah, I think social media is like, I'll give an example this week. It's a very touchy subject, right? You know, when you're talking about anything regarding faith. And Kev on stage this week, everybody kind of saw he put the post. He had the sister Candace, who's a kind of theologian, sister in the kingdom, and then there was another sister, Jackie Hill Perry, who's like well known as well. And then they were talking about some touchy subjects, right? Jackie Hill Perry was like she kind of said it was like she went through she kind of talked about her story of being a lesbian and struggling with that on. And so you have people who have different views on this subject, and she's just giving her experience, and he's just there interviewing. And like, the fact is, like, you should see the comments. Like, it wasn't like an attack, but it was like the idea of even someone would just actually propose, like, okay, I hear what you're saying here, but could you consider that this may be something? People, nah, blah, blah, blah. Like, people have no space to actually, it's like you have no space for your learning to be beyond your understanding. And I think that's why even the scriptures kind of like lean out on your understanding. Like, we're limited. We don't know everything. And it's also better. That's why I say it's better to have more counsel, right? You don't know everything. So when you make decisions, it's better to consult people because you get different perspectives. I think that plays off one-on-one. Because I said, I'd rather be on the perspective of getting more from people and hearing, even though it's a little annoying, than less. That scares me. Because like at some point, I'm saying this is like sometimes there was one of the scariest, one of the strongest ones somebody said was kind of like, sometimes God just allows you to do what you want to do. And that's like the scariest thing you can imagine, right? To say, oh wow, I think I know everything and I want to do this. And I've been restrained from doing this. And one is kind of like, all right, go on, dog. I think sometimes people are like that. They get tired at some point if they consistently try to give thoughts, give feedback, give perspective. And you kind of on your Molly, kind of like, no, bloop, bloop, bloop. So at some point, people are like, all right, go on then. You know what I'm saying?
I also think that we are not valuing how courageous it is to ask for help, or courageous it is to consult. I think a lot of times we think that people who are successful or strong know everything and they did it all on their own. They don't see the team that they're working with, so they think that team does not exist. So when you tell them, oh, you should do this and you should do that, they get really defensive because you just told them. They think that you're undermining what they know versus like trying to build and challenge and improve. So I think there needs to be a shift in society about acceptance of criticism, or there needs to be some honesty and transparency from successful people on everything they did to be where they are.
Yeah. I love it. You know what's interesting? Think about our society. We don't celebrate failure. Right? And so this is the cousin of the humility to admit when you're wrong, humility to need when you need help. Right? It's that we celebrate the winners. We celebrate those who succeed. Those who know, experts who know more. We don't celebrate the lack thereof, the who did not fully understand, who messed up and tried to maybe the redemption story, but not necessarily that they did that, but things that are out of their control, redemption story, right? But very much so, I think that plays and spills into how we approach the world, because we want to be valued in that society. We want to be valued in that type of community. We want to be valued in that space. And so we've seen the unsaid rules. And so in order for me to seem valuable, I have to actually live out this facade, which is why people are, there's some level of privacy, not just on bad things, but in terms of negative things, challenging things, because like, how are people going to perceive? And what people say is that oftentimes you're trying to impress people who don't give a thing about you. But why does that matter to us? Because perception matters. Because these people, how they view me, right? Why do you think people get depressed over likes on Instagram? Because now you've grafted likes onto sense of self and identity. So again, if the rules of this type of terrain is that the winners, the experts, those who know everything, who do it, if that's the rules, then unconsciously I'm going to operate out of that, and I'm not going to I'm not going to ever give you a window into when I don't win, when I don't know, when I don't understand, when I need, when I'm not sufficient. That is, I think, the conundrum. This is kind of the challenge of living that out, is that you actually really have to be secure. But I think this kind of reflects just kind of the dynamic that we see.
But here's the thing, people have control. Even if likes are a thing, you don't have to make them control you. You don't need to have them have an impact on you. They're just likes. You know what I mean? We act like we're in society and we have no autonomy. We subscribe to all these things. You can unsubscribe. And I think people act like Facebook exists, social media exists, so you have to interact with it the way the creator wanted you to interact with it, which is far from the truth. And so there's a deficiency in you that has dragged you into this rabbit hole and now made you a prisoner of something that really matters to no one, unless you're trying to get like ad payments.
With you sometimes I feel like you being hard, you delivering hard truth, sis. I think, easier said than done, right? But you're right. Like, I do feel like there's a matter of fact moment, but I always think like, I think it's a helpful, I call it chin check for us, when the things that we challenge people on publicly, right, are things that we struggle with privately, right? Think about it. Like, how many, whether it's relationship, business partnerships and the like, these are rooted on our ability to be able to hear, to deliver, to, do these things. Now, if I'm going out chin checking all these people publicly, right, I think one of the greatest litmus tests is, say, do I even do this in my own personal relationships? If I don't, or if it's difficult, then I can have grace towards this person who clearly is struggling to do it out here, right? We bring who we are outside, inside. We bring who we are inside, outside. So that person who is struggling to accept guidance from some stranger or from some random person is probably the same person who struggles to accept guidance from that familiar person, though it shouldn't be that way. And I'm not saying that's across the board, but it makes sense. And I think that should humble all of us, right? I always keep saying that should humble us all, because I know that this is difficult for me. I haven't met some married couple, friends who don't struggle with, to some degree, hearing hard truth and delivering hard truth, right? And one activity I've tried to work on, I'm not saying I'm great on it, is that even, for example, like, I don't pop in, I don't think going to social media is to go to the fight or debate, but if there's something that's important, or some people that I know who I know very well, who are involved in a dialogue, sometimes I'll engage with kind of the anchoring or the opposing point, and I'll engage trying to work on using language that will disarm, right? And so I'm kind of like, yeah, that was really, really right. I can see how you're saying that. But what about this? It doesn't, I'm not saying this is me perfectly in person, right? But I do think that how we deal with people publicly is a mirror, or something that should slow us down a bit, because I think a lot of our expectations of how people deal with this privately, we don't do this very well publicly, and the expectation we have of people publicly, we don't do it very well privately. And I think that should bring us all to center.
I also think when we talk about delivery, I try to lead by example. So when I'm transparent about my own deficiencies, struggles, trauma, I think that makes the people in my inner circle more comfortable to be like, oh, I see this in you. Because you can hear that I'm not perfect. I'm honest with my imperfections. I'm honest with my struggle. So maybe you feel less attacked when I say, hey, I see this in you. Right? So now, because a lot of people are competing, even with the people next to them. And we're not fully aware of that. So when I say, hey, like when I talk to my partner, I'll be like, no one's better than anybody, but this is what I see it. But I'm struggling with my own stuff. You know what I mean? When I tell someone no one is better than anyone, here's my own stuff that I'm struggling with, I think it makes it more accepting to the other person when they're struggling with something. Because now it's two people struggling. So now you don't feel attacked.
Mm.
Hey, Danielle.
Yeah, and I think this is a great moment to big you up. I think part of one of the reasons why I was excited and that we eventually kind of got to be able to make this space just to talk like brothers and sisters because I've received you as that, right? Like there are things I've said which I know are very, there's perspectives. We have very strong perspectives on a lot of things, but your ability to hear and be like, or like listen, like, and sometimes it's chicken and the egg, and let's be honest, right? For some people is like, okay, right, is it because you've seen that from the person and so you feel disarmed to be able to do that? Is it the reverse, right? And I think sometimes I think that's hard, and also because when you're personal, you have a lot more personal infractions, right? The closer you are, the more that person can bump you, right? So when you carry enough of those scars, your willingness to want to hear stuff goes down, maybe, right? And so it's almost like it's the cumulative baggage that may come with certain dynamics or relationship friends where it makes it harder even though they're closer, right? Versus you don't know me from Adam and you're like, of course I can hear it, yeah, right? It's like, I ain't with you in the day, in the morning. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, there's both sides of that, right? But I do want to be up in terms of that because I do think there's something to be said about a singular point here around like I do think that's rare. I do think that's rare in this time, and I think that's part of what we're bringing up of just this willingness and ability, or just having this, and and maybe another conversation would be how it shows up differently, right? Right, but I do think that's rare, and so I just want to big you up because I think that you have a great way of being able to hear, deliver, consider, and not feel like not kind of be blown off kilter and be like, yo, right? You know what I'm saying? So I do think there's a gift, and I want to big you up on that.
But the problem I have is no matter how well you deliver stuff, people literally think you're attacking them. Like, if I tell one of my friends that you have a hypersensitivity when people bring up your father,
Mm.
she may never talk to me. She may never talk to me. And and I see it because she keeps on talking about the men in her life, but never around like some deeper issue. And I, as a friend, have decided that I'm gonna try to spend less time with my friends talking about other people's problems and see if they'll share with me some of their inner problems. Right?
Mm.
We can talk for hours about what he did to you, or what your homegirl did to you, or what your office mate did to you, what your boss did to you, but we spend very little time talking about like your triggers around that. Did you do anything? Did your reaction do anything? Because something you learn in therapy is the focus is you, never the other person, because the other person's not in the room. So your therapist is just trying to assess your reaction to whatever external factor. So I don't know, because we do spend a lot of time when you call your homegirl, your sister, your brother, they all tell you what other people have done to them and made their day a bad day. Not enough about what they experience and their reaction that might have led to the bad day.
Yeah. I think we're as a people, as people, we're geared towards justice, right? If something has happened, we want resolution, we want justice, right? And I think to some degree, when you point out something, you learn to walk alongside for some extended period of time. Yeah, I think I think when you experience or hear things, sometimes you feel like either there's an injustice that's happened and people are pointing out something that's tied to it, and you kind of want to feel heard. And I think sometimes when someone delivers a truth about an unresolved issue or something you feel resolved, you feel so unheard. It brings up the lack of justice you felt in that thing. And, more than anything, you just want somebody to say you understand, right? But I do think it takes maturity. It really takes maturity where you can hold two things in the hand. And I think here's the difficult thing as well. I felt like I was on a roller coaster with the camera. Yeah. I think this is difficult as well. This is why I think like it's so great to have counsel. It's also good to like have some sort of divine exploration or journey that you may be exploring. Part of it is because if you don't want to hear truth, you'll always make it about the fact it wasn't delivered well. That's the truth. If we're being honest, when we don't want to hear everything, we'll find any excuse not to hear it. And so you'll make it about everybody and everything but the truth. And so, again, whether or not, it's not saying that we should aspire to deliver things in an unloving way. What I am saying, though, is that if that is the barrier to truth, it says a lot about your pursuit or desire for it. And so if I am always, is dismissing or deflecting and making it about the other person, what the other person is also showing is that whether or not I said something, there was a lack of initiative for you to take ownership of this thing. You have not looked enough inside, right? And so it doesn't surprise me that when I bring this up, you make it about what I did or how I'm saying this. But I think for all of us, I think to your initial point around the leading fears about these things, I really think it's difficult, and maybe some of the takeaway points. I think it's hard to ever have a healthy friendship unless a person can deliver hard truth and be a human and stumble while they do it, right? I think that's a testimony of a maturity to be able to desire truth, but also the maturity of your relationship and how you view that person, to be able to allow a person to be human and stumble in how they deliver truth. A lot of times people can throw the scripture, speak the truth in love, but it's like sometimes they talk about the relationship. My brother, talk about the relationship. You need relationship in love. It's not just about delivering flowers, like relationship, right? When there's proximity, there's power. To be able to hear, proximity helps to close the gap. It's not a caricature. You're hearing the person. And that should give some goodwill to hearing the difficulty. There should be some goodwill that allows some pillows for that to land. And so I think in many ways, this difficulty both shows maybe the superficiality of many of the relationships people have and the opportunity for it to get deeper and have a little bit more depth and maturity. And I think it also shows the lack of maturity, I think, that many of us all carry, even as much as we look to mature, right? We should desire that, right? And so as much as I even say this, I could see those, even with all the mentors that I have and all the people that I speak to, I hear with, I do know that there are areas in sensitive places in my life that if somebody says something, it's going to be difficult for me to hear, but it's easier if there is some proximity in that relationship. I do think that helps.
I do think you brought up a good point. I hate the fact that I'm not going. Sorry. I think you brought up a good point that when people are close to you, they do just want to lay down their burdens to the people near them. They want to release all the stuff that has been brewing inside of them. And sometimes when they call you or reach out to the people in close proximity to them, that is all they call you for. So I do think a lot of times when your friends and family and loved ones are unpacking their day with you, it may not be the same day to deliver a truth. It might not be the same day. That day might be a day for your friends to just be heard, whoever that person is in that circle. And I do believe you need to create a subsequent time to deliver a truth. You know what I mean? But like you said, if you didn't want to take that truth, no matter what day, no matter how I package it, you don't want to hear it, you're not going to hear it. But I do think that shouldn't stop people from telling those truths. Because there are people in our lives, and I think we are intended to drop the seed. What they do with that seed is their own business, but that information was delivered. They can do whatever they want, and if it is a true relationship, they know you didn't come from a bad place. You know what I mean? You are just delivering a truth because you're my friend and I'm going to tell you the truth. Or you're the person I love, I'm going to tell you the truth. And no, I'm not attacking you. That doesn't mean I don't think you're perfect. That doesn't mean I don't think you're loved. That doesn't mean I don't think your goal is going to be accomplished. That means in your pursuit of whatever, keep this in mind. Hey, Evelyn, I see you. Just keep it in mind. That's what I think people struggle with when delivering a hard truth, because hearing it is a lot of internal work that I just wish we lived in a society where people would work on themselves and have the capacity to hear bad truth, hard truths.
Mm,
But we're carrying a lot of pain, and we don't have room for the people around us who are supposed to love us and comfort us to give us more, because a lot of people are carrying a lot of stuff and they don't have any capacity to hear more stuff. So they just remain in denial
mm,
as a
mm,
defense mechanism. Not like to be evil, but like Molly's trying to keep herself together, for example, Insecure. That is why I think she struggles with all this stuff. It's a defense mechanism sometimes, the inability to hear, because you have so much other stuff you haven't processed.
mm, mm. Yo, it's I love what you said. I think even talking about how best to serve people in those moments and maybe timing, when people say these things and how best to serve, right? You learn this in kind of like in couples counseling and the like, where somebody's coming to say something. They said, "What do you need from me? Do you need me to be a listener? Do you need me to be a problem solver?" Brothers, we be messing up about these joints, right? But I think what we miss is that part of that is rooted in love, because you're saying, how can I best serve you? Because I actually really care for you. And so how could I actually serve? Right? So I may have all these desires. I actually may have something I got going on. And there are times in conversations, like shout out to one of my friends today. It was yesterday actually. Called up and they had a lot going on and I had a lot going on. Right? And at that time, I just chose to listen because I heard that. And then today they called back and they said, "I know you got stuff going on. I don't want to, and I'm like, "How are you?" They're like, talk. And I was like, "Oh, wow." Because in that moment, that's what that person needed, and being able to be there, because you can't do both, because they needed to be heard. And then now coming back because they knew that it was a space to be able to do so. I think that is so, so keen, be able to have that space to be able to speak in that way. I love what Monty said. A good friend of mine always asks me if I have room to hear her mess. I love that about her. Yeah, I think that is where we need to have those relationships. And what it says like it talks. There's kind of a scripture that talks about how you almost it is like you don't want the false flattery, right? you know, and so I call these kind of empty calories. You may, like the Molly, because you're preserving yourself, block all the real truth, have all these people who may, because they understand the force field you put up, anytime you share, you have all these people and there's this false sense of harmony. That's empty calories. Because again, when push comes to shove, you'll need that. I'd rather have less and not have the flattery multiplied and have a real friend who actually is giving me the truth. And you may have less, but you have real richness. That's real nutrients. There's real relationship, right? And I'm finding at this stage of my life how valuable that is, right? Like I think sometimes I feel so exposed in the roles I play often in community where sometimes you give, but sometimes people don't care for you like that. Like the truth is, like they may think that you're cool, but they don't care for you like that, right? And I realize I'm like, okay, it's helpful for me to like orient my time. Doesn't mean that there's a bad thing, but like let me double down where I know I'm gonna get the rich, hard, right? And it may come at the expense of me being in the outer rims where it's superficial, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm gonna grow more where I get the difficult truth and love versus I'm getting the false flattery, right? From someone who we haven't built the maturity enough to actually be able to deliver those things in a way that helps both of us.
So I know we are going to end soon, but I do want to just on the comment about like I have a friend who asked first. When we talk about delivery, sometimes we call our friends and families and loved ones. We don't know where mental state they are before we start unpacking on them.
Mm,
So their reaction may be inappropriate or not to our liking, because they were already dealing with a lot, and there could have been like a trigger with your lot, like you said, and my a lot, and therefore the reaction and the emotional support I needed, or the message they delivered to me, or their response towards my situation may have been very, very hurtful. So
Mm.
I do think it's important when we call our loved ones, people in our circle, to check in before we unload. Because sometimes we
Mm.
just go in and start going in about our bad day and not checking in if that person has the capacity to receive all we're going to unpack. So I think that's also really important, because that affects people's delivery sometimes, or people's reaction to your situation sometimes, if they're not in a good place. Like if my partner had a bad day at work, maybe it's not the day to start talking about everything I feel that day. Um, so, because you might not be able to control the reaction. So that's a
Yeah.
thing as well.
Yeah, it's. I think it's also a master class or seminar in delayed gratification as well, right? That we want what we want and we want it now. I want support. I want it now, and I've actually found that usually sometimes when I feel so burdened by this, sometimes I actually feel better when I get my mind off of me and my life and my things. And because again, if you're coming in and think about it, if maybe the balance of your time, all you're always calling to unload as opposed to calling to ask, knowing that all of us every single day got some junk to deal with, then I think that's also helps us recalibrate, right? And, we shouldn't always be going to get our needs met. Maybe there's a balance, and then in the same way that you serve that person, they just may have gotten off the phone where they had to hear and they didn't get heard, and you just call them and look at how the cycle and the harmony of all that goes. And so I think it's a great place for us to even kind of close right around, you know, our assumptions we make, sometimes how self-centered we may be unintentionally when we get consumed by our own trauma, consumed by our own lives. And I think the truth, as you kind of pointed out, is we're all hurting out here. We all got stuff. And so the more that we can be considerate, the more that we can give grace when people don't deliver things well, right? Hey, Millie, how you doing? It's one niece. I think we all would be better off along the way.
Yeah, I think, how do you hear and deliver hard truth? You start by being able to accept the truth.
Bam.
And like, that's it. You humble yourself. And once you're transparent with other people, no one's perfect. The truth is belongs to everyone, and no one's perfect. If you're delivering it one day, you're going to be on the receiving end the other day. So it's just a what, honestly, should feel like a whatever. Especially from people who love you,
Mm.
which, Molly never figured out.
Why you gotta give
But
her some
that is
parting
it.
shots? You always take a shot, sis.
Oh, just joking. It's a fictional character. All right. Next week, 7:30. Hopefully we're on time.
Yeah, we were chatting, y'all. Don't we were actually on time, but we were chatting family business. Pre this. So thank y'all for rolling with us in a little later edition. But as my sister said, see y'all next week.
Next week. Bye.